It's cheap and nasty. There is something else, please.
Get vanilla bread.
I cannot be concerned with this right now. I'm sorry. I gotta judge.
You playing solitaire on your computer.
Where do you see solitaire?
You just changed the tab, go.
I did not. What are you talking
Yo, why
about?
you
This is literally survival. What are you talking about?
So I'm gonna be cards for the next round. Uh-oh.
Are you ready?
I was ready.
Oh, I didn't get that. Yes, I did. Oh, so NYU is that explains the lateness.
Shut up.
My decision is it?
Is everyone good? Yep.
You know, whenever I think about all the struggles and strife I've been through in my life, it's truly hard to comprehend it. I mean, I'm sitting inside a cage on death row, yo. So far away from home, so far away from everything I know. Might as well be sitting inside the hold of a spaceship. That's what it feels like to be here.
Welcome. Though you've arrived at my house, I really want to welcome you to my home. I want to distinguish my home from my house, my sense of comfort. Security here exceeds the cover of the roof. Living here has me having to think intensely about the environment that surrounds the house. Where is home for the black body? What is home for the black body? When is mom coming home? She has insomnia from all the night shifts she works, then she comes back home and has to raise a family and then go back to work. She works too hard. When are you coming home, Mom? We miss you. You work too hard. I know you're trying to survive for yourself, for us. I can't wait to give you rest.
What does home mean when the elusiveness of home has characterized black existence in the United States?
How do we find home when we were taken from our lands, our homes, our families, our culture? How do we work towards a new home when black Americans are more likely to breathe contaminated air, live on toxic soil, drink poisoned water, and be displaced from unlivable conditions?
Yet it's hard sometimes to see how what I'm going through is connected to what my ancestors suffered and survived. Truth be told, I'm lucky to be alive, real talk. Sometimes when things get too heavy to carry, I close my eyes and drift back to a time when everything was all good. A time when it was fully understood that being here on this earth was the biggest blessing. My grandfather taught me that. You see, I grew up in a neighborhood called the Village, a small enclave on the east side of Cleveland. A beautiful place, yo, with fruit trees and sweet things on every corner, no lie.
No fruit trees and sweet things for us now. Instead, I noticed that oil refinery shouldn't be here.
That road shouldn't be here. My house shouldn't be here.
I don't want to live like this. Mom did not sign up for this. She did not want to live in an institution. She wanted to be cared for at home. However, she did not want to make us feel as if caring for her was our sole responsibility or another job for me either.
I was surrounded by my family and friends then. I'm telling you, there was no end to the love we shared. A real community planned by people whose only plan was to live and give everything they had. They gave it all. Children of slaves who braved the worst of it. So we, the children and grandchildren, could make the most of it. Yeah.
The disabled,
The niggas,
the indigenous,
the black women that carried the world on their backs,
ought they continue to work endlessly selling their own bodies?
for it appears the perfection of society under capital involves the branding of labor onto black flesh such that labor is black. I know what you might be thinking, another nigga talking about niggas. The ballad, why not just read a plan text? How unfair. That would be wrong because it is impossible impossible to address this year's topic without emphasizing blackness as a tool that undermines the question of labor.
The 1EC begins with the question of enclosure. Colonialism has situated blackness in a house with no home.
There was nothing left for the black body to bargain with except for the flesh.
Perfection of slavery is a project that cannot advance without aiding blacks in alternative capitalism that denies hope to free workers amidst constructed by black vulnerabilities, excess Mubiro, Masoki, and 22, the slave trade, the Berlin conflict, state unions continue to work in the transformation of Africans into black people and forbid their memory of home black people with the violation of the general economy, no sanctuary for blacks is forever eligible comes from the illogical general economy of vulnerability, structural negativity, anti-black provides for the consolation of political ontologies, discourse, blacks extend beyond semiotics and the leadership functioning outside the rare exploitation of the worker, the eligibility of black vulnerability, decides of antagonism beyond the reconciliation of class conflict, the argument for the workers to reconcile the state, civil society, state violence, and not a manipulation of civil society, academic recognizing fair labor practice, not a matter of social reorganization of class violence, and structural and gratuitous without reason. The Bible for breathing also violates that separates the proletariat from the slave, highlights the excessiveness of black vulnerability position below or beyond the human. There's no grand plan how destruction may take place. There still means to articulate impossible ethics, the ethical establishment. It remains or escape social political death through fugitive black sociality.
You'll shield us from the pain of knowing the truth. They never explained what kind of society we were born into. They didn't tell us about all the tricks and traps that were designed to be enslaved, or about the hate that could deliver us to an early grave. They wanted us to be free. They wanted us not to see all the ugliness around us. So a lot of us got caught into the darkness, lost the light that was meant to guide us through. Gotta tell the children the truth. Tell them it's not what they say, but what they do. Tell them the real about reality. Their life isn't meant to be fair. That's meant to be lived. Tell the children the truth. Yeah.
What does fairness mean when Keith Lamar is scheduled to be executed January 13, 2027? Keith Lamar is innocent. He was deprived of a fair trial by an all-white jury and judge.
There's no fairness for the black body when black has been constructed as a threat to the hegemonic creating the social order, thought of superless CEDA. Even in the 20 years since conception, policy debate, future control, alternative conception, debatable game theories become dominant, marginalized students find a major challenge, repression, white policy, debatable engaging with radical black thought. The success of black debate cannot be measured by recognition, seems to justify the social construct, not inherently limits white function, the universal standard of communication, the white traditional policy debater stands as a reference point for debate, very critical challenge by black debaters, peripheral, threatening, and unpredictable threats associated with blackness, taken apart from criminality, gets queer, considers that stalking, white policy debate, race, the court, and the very real social question, but critical debate considers question of ontology, language, orientation, representation, what moves the social black academics must become undisciplined.
So for Keith Lamar, niggas beyond home is not fixable in space, but is the sense of something that we carry in us.
Thus, the 1EC welcomes you home. The house is parasitic upon the black bodies who said vote have to construct home. Voting out re-landscapes the terrain of how to strike from whiteness such that blackness is relocated within the side of both resistance and refuge. That's right. In 60, the countless African songs and theories and the concept of home is marriage, the expression of self-determination by persons of African descent with the control over slavery, challenge video, home is a transitional side of marriage. There also without the home, the function, safe, nurturing place for individuals, offer refuge, home place of queerability, beside of body, sexual agency, homes, links inside a community, underscoring the women's center on the home place, a vital secure space for human agency, have reference, home place, and another safe location, written by young black girls navigating unsafe things, the home place, and efforts that you can face for African American men to do the self-sacrifice that African American men make on behalf of their communities, active mentorship. The form of home place ensures equity, longevity with academia, home place set up liberation, domination, predominantly. One institution functions taking care of African women with the Academy of African Women, home place within the church and community organizations, they operate as both production and sustainability. Home place operates in ritual terms, stated by the set of persons in addition to identifying homes and marriage African Americans physically maintain their home to make it livable for all within the community. Marriage collectively bargains against social relations of slavery by the collective music making that is jazz. And what he sees not solely a metatextual reading of but intervenes with jazz as a pragmatic response to the black condition. Parson in 25 there remains arguments about jazz and practice because of marriage and future to musicianship are intimately intertwined with implication for both jazz and black American music. The collective music making the space of communities creating a conditional possibility for pieces of black music productive fugitivity. Several years of marriage and adapt through many liberal discourse back to the music counter tradition of marriage music and most African response to African support social death and shadow legislation every music escape from the politics system of racial domination the tax of multiple streams of vocals breaking private transformative black event the triggers bondage of marriage struggle between marriage and black music found in the field of black yogurt and marriage the method for imagining the world as marriage must be understood not just as a fleeting practice but a significant method of producing place birds making the resistance slave owner reduction of bodies and property while searching out a relational framework capable of putting into black counter religion alternative musicians the theme of music murder future methods on the metatextual intervention and pragmatic response to black condition of music both proceeds and expresses black life music making both a part of the communities and a condition for the possibility.
The role of the judge to be a gardener, cultivate the environment around the home, extend sanctuary for black life. Because the gardens are extraordinary spaces, and so as we start thinking about home, one of the things we've got to do is locate it. The strike of the 1EC is one that spans this room, and the histories of anti-blackness that permeate the space of debate. These futures the 1EC imagines are not white, these are black ecologies. Because it's up against a system that would have us be property and negotiate our relationship around ownership while being owned. And so as the story continues to unfold, we should say that again, welcome to our home.
I'm good.
Good for cross-legs?
Yeah.
Alright. What is the value of negating the one he's seen?
I mean, like, we think, A, that's not necessarily our burden. Two, we think
So it's
negation
not
is
your
good.
burden to have a
Negation
role
is
for the
good
negative.
for, like, we think arguments about, like, you know, diving into the literature of black scholarship. We think that if the one in C does not have, like, a means of, you know, discussing the black radical tradition, that's fine, but that doesn't mean you should win.
Okay, discuss black radical tradition. I guess, so then what does negation look like?
Negating the tactics that surround homemaking. Homemaking is an analytic or theory of society. Marriage is a method, etc., etc.
Okay, so you defend marriage as a method. Do you defend anything else as a tactic other than marriage?
Sorry?
Do you defend other things other than marriage as a tactic?
Like, we think marriage is an analytic, right? So,
You just said it was a tactic and that
well,
home
I
was the
mean,
analytic.
marriage is a tactic, but we are saying we are making an analytic of homemaking as marriage, which is, like, we think distinct. Right? Our argument is that, like, marriage is homemaking is a politics of strategic inhabitation that isn't just moving away, but strategically inhabiting anti-black and extractive spaces to create moments of survival, resistance, and care to counteract those processes.
Okay. Does the AF defend jazz as a tactic?
Like, we think jazz is one example of black sociality. We're not saying, like, oh, yeah, the AF is, like, jazz is, like, the solution to, like, anti-blackness. No.
Okay, but it's still a good mode of sociality.
Well, yeah, we think
How do you
jazz
ensure that
can be a
home?
good form of sociality.
Thank you. How do you ensure that home is going to be safe for everyone in it?
Well, that's the whole argument about accountability mechanisms. Like, definitionally, that's the process of what
What
home
kind
is.
of accountability mechanisms?
Right, meaning
Well, I mean, it depends for who, but I think the one easy has defined the process of emergence as insurgent homemaking, i.e., because who need homes create homes because they are seeking reprieve from systems of extraction, which means by
Right.
definition they are always already safe.
But like, why are black people safe in their homes? Like Wilderson getting radiation poisoning in his house from the CIA. Like, why?
That's
Where
our
does the
whole,
safety
well, I
come
mean,
from?
first of all, this is our whole, like, premise, right? Like, the world is anti-black. Black people are, the boots of the world are always on black people's fucking neck, which is why there's a necessity to counteract those processes and create what
Right.
is
Like,
what our Mubiru Masoki evidence describes as an impossible ethics, right?
Right,
It is both a site of liberation and domination,
No,
but
no.
within those sites, it is
Look,
necessary to create a counteracting and alternative mode of life that enables blackness to strike from those processes.
I'm with you that we need an alternative. Why is home an alternative that is a refuge from anti-blackness?
Well, one, the whole point is that it is like a safe space for blackness that is definitionally, like, black people throughout history are able to form safe spaces, but two, like, we argue, like, movement building is a part of
The
it.
one he talks about a mother who cannot be home because she works night shifts. What does the AF do for that mother?
That's Manny's mom, bro. Like, what do you
Well,
got?
sorry, it's not clear in the AF. But like, what would the AF do?
Is
I don't
Manny
think
saying
the one
mom?
ever used the word mother. He said mom.
Well, whatever.
Okay. One in sequence, that could be two in case. Oh, where's our second?
It's right there.
Whoa. You said 2 up?
Two.
Four more than you. Look at
I don't know that.
that. You barely have any words on that. Just barely words on there.
Yeah, because you got like 30 each fine. Oh.
My font is smaller than you.
Okay, before the one in C is sent, I'm having an issue with my keyboard. Is that okay? I gotta start my laptop. and do
Yes.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Sorry, this has been happening if I open up too much shit. My laptop won't register that I'm typing stuff.
Yeah. One of the rounds, it took me like 3 minutes for the doc to sync, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like,
Yeah. I have to delete and reinstall my keyboard drivers.
Oh no.
It's not gonna take like that long. I just need to
Well, that
reinstall.
fair,
What a
fair.
coincidence.
Yeah, it really is a bad coincidence.
Take your time. So, champ, why don't you on the
would I be?
Oh, here you go, here you go, here you go.
Why would I be?
Why would I be?
Because you're part of the district, your region, I mean, your region, elected you to do that? My region put Ryan on there, so.
Wait, who's the bank?
That's just in the first night.
Why?
How long is your computer gonna take to restart?
That's gonna take a couple minutes.
Okay, then I'll use the rest.
So,
No, I mean, the restroom will probably be.
Okay.
okay.
Almonds, Reverends. What?
That's it?
No.
7?
It's 9.
That's what I'm saying. So me, Tay, Ryan, AC, Harmon. It's 5. Taj is 6.
Taj.
Can we do more? Come on. Come on, Vice President.
Natty Stolarsky. Ryan, David Rudy, Taj, Ryan.
Say no.
Chafee.
Oh, thank God. Jesus Christ. Okay, that makes my life easier.
How far of a drive I would imagine is NYU from Binghamton?
It's like 2.5.
Well, that's not bad.
Can you do me a favor and send a new email chain?
Yes.
Can you add IGS corner?
Give me 1 second.
AD?
Try all. IGS,
Corner?
like CORREN.
Like corner of the store.
That doesn't help me. I'm really bad
Oh,
at spelling.
CORNER. COR.
CORNER.
Yes.
Okay,
At Gmail.
okay.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah,
see what they got.
I'm uniquely bad at spelling. It's
Huh?
like, I said I'm uniquely bad at spelling.
Oh.
There's a genetic link in that. You might be able to blame your parents.
Wow, yeah. We can definitely do that. Okay, that one and C was resent. The updated email chain. Yes.
Oh, capitalism, okay.
Shocking.
Oh, no, not y'all, no.
Oh.
Sorry. Alright,
Tis the strap.
let me look at y'all's, sorry. Oh, this is the second one. Okay, cool.
Alrighty.
I'm ready.
To download the doc.
Yeah, we did have like a little malware installed on your files, so yeah, just be
Yeah, I
patient.
wouldn't blame you.
Mr. Computer Science over here was was like, you're prepping the 2 NC? He's like, no, I'm putting a code into the 1 NC.
Vermont. Vermont, yo. They're reading Vermont.
Oh, yeah, but I guess.
Taiwo.
Oh, yeah. The difference is bad, bro.
This is funny.
Houston. FL?
Again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Better than Taiwo.
Parameters?
Oh, what they picking out of?
Man, I read parameters.
Yeah, S. Sorry.
What are they parameting out of?
Alright, I guess
What are they
I'll fuck myself.
parameting out of?
Are you good? Yeah, I'm good. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
We should
Anyone
have
else?
explained
Ready?
the methods of clear metric.
Judges.
Yeah, I'm ready, but they also spelled metric wrong, but whatever.
Hey, it's part of the absolute.
Okay. Interpretation. Topical affirmers must say the United States federal government straight collective bargaining for workers. Federal government means the national government and not the state localities. Thompson 7. Federal is based central government and DC differs from state government. Strength means to make more efficient. Cambridge Dictionary notates makes it stronger to make more effective. Collective bargaining is governed by statute, industry regs, or judicial decisions. Cornell LII notate. Collective bargaining between employer and industry agreements is governed by statutory laws, agency regs, and judicial decisions. Worker means all workers. ILO 81. The term workers refers to all employees, including all employed persons, including public employees. Vote negative. 1. T is a prior question to debate of what it should look like. The rule of the judge to vote for the better debater. 2. Competitive equity. Debate is a game driven by competitive incentives that means banning topical statements creates a moral hazard and avoiding controversial positions. Denies a predictable role for the negative. Competitive equity is a prerequisite to political value of debate and the impact of value can solve. High level debates are won and lost in the margin, so the threshold for impact is low. 3. Clash. An external impact to the argument engagement. They are right. The debate can shape activity. Only those shifts occur through rigorous contestation over the course of a season, not disciplinary action, but rather centering of collective bargaining rights is critical for dialogue rather than a textual reading of the resolution, ensuring a limit on affirmatives and guaranteed negative ground. Clash has an impact in every debate, help break some dogma, create better advocates, and refine argument, which turns case the cap K. Capitalism wants social struggle to racial segregation, the vehicle two of its continuation. The market tips towards accumulation of value, so chooses rapidly intensifying anti-black capacity, colonial ratification intensifies. This theorization gives urgency to our task to bring about a communist transition. Back to me 3. Rather than injuries to generate advance margins, theory of ruling the movement of capital mediation, social gender violence, racial mediation, the capital mechanism of continuation, the capital social substance substitution that creates the possibility emergence of value that opposes the psychomatic production of basis of the criminal stereotypes made possible by the emergence of value, the same things concealed by the regular freedom of capital is the process of the sedentary, the promise of value creation, determinated to those points of evidence, generalizing the distinction in the world that capital creates is established more rapidly does the capital machine spur to the built-in crisis over accumulation, subjugation, mediated capital surplus, disposition and incarcerated, murder, missing murder, wounded capacity bodies for free situation, raising for survival, category capture, terrifying, leaving the capital, one can conceals the value function of obstruction capital leverage, duration, gender, because their abstraction and continuation of the label identities of capital, they argue that gender racialized violence persists because of colonial persists like capital for continuation violence, capital black media situation, but those are the worst regulations are different colonial capital continuation, the restoration of the value boom, it is own will involved in the abolition of capital, where reckless violence is a condition of everything else, the communists are payable debt. Anti-black violence operates through structural location of blackness, and economic relationism powers black labor markets and social order through super exploitation, that's surplus value of black bodies, redlining, wage gap, sharecropping, tendency, and other racialized policies render black labor an unskilled and devalued. Burns Silly 23. The SLLB describes an economic relationship between is inscribed subordinate placement in the social order and endangers the discursive configurations, the presence of legitimacy, racial hierarchy, the representation of the motives, extraction, in which is the exploitation of leads to the substitute, which is exceeds the exploitation of white working class, which is white workers is super exploited because of the urban laborers, the lowest paying job of the black labor, even skilled to the value to set aside the capital norms of the future of child labor, costs in jail, in prisons, this exploitation is manifested in the black women, rendering economic preferable to exploit and oppress. This surplus labor's market is in the home, the black sharecroppers, and tenants of the crops, the wages, the livelihoods of the virtual bodies to do little limited economic control, due to relations, dominations, differentiated in New York, market considerations to limit black housing to cells for profit engages in violence, recording restrictive currencies, the court's decisions, and connotated exploitation to domination, and a common distortion of companies more related to the role of state corporations vested in immense profit, black suffering, the political economy constituted Africa is the arresting the development in the way the relations to the raw material of plumbing the ground for capital surplus. Debate is the site of labor. What we do here matters, but it's merely aspiring for inclusion to instructors, green lights predatory inclusion that dominates and gatekeeps the vast majority of people that locks and debates the structural relationship for labor and sustains it. Alzarello and Corelli 24. The University is the integral part of American dream, however, in the life of university comes from fearless response to student uprising news makers, and have a registered constituted corporate issues of the type predatory inclusion members marginal schools who provided access under conditions that jeopardize benefit. The university relies on a highly privatized, perceived adjudication of labor. The response to hyper-exploitation is more than economic policy game along with ideologies like this, like diversity and empowerment ideas, identification of the process, meritocracy, knowledge of the divine orders, differences made through the machinery, validation, eligibility, database argument, enhancing, and develops a hegemony money rather than destruction of neoliberalism. The university was made to justify increasing segregation with the increase of incorporating students of color. The anti-Marxist ideas in the university became hegemonic and not even among regards to the Marxism. The revolutionary vote was thrown away as anarchists dismissed as a direction that the university was part of transgression of veneer while upholding capital inclusion doesn't mean iniquity instead of hierarchy, rather made the richer richer and the poorer poorer. Moronic mistakes fight for freedom, relying on selling out runaway slaves and maintenance of unsustainable form of counterinsurgent resistance. Andrews 18. Or must be their freedom is not a place, but a state of being. Flight is not freedom, pedagogy, religious, temporary, enslaved would return fleeing. Did not bring freedom. Constitutions shaped life. It is defined where and how they could live constantly. Vigilant life of freedom meant to learn each community decided to choose colonial power to protect themselves and news would not agree to stop it. Attempting to free the enslaved, well, the return to water, coalition maroons. And we were fearless, ransom, deep, continued in adopting slavery. Flight may be a rational response, but it's not a radical one. The critical applies to black politics, where the radical revolutionary appears to the needs of daunting position. The difference was the norm, and the use of the term revolution is negative change. The change was come from within before social information academia that can focus on ideas and knowledge is to produce change. Fugitivity, narrative, genre dominates the historical memory of slave and abolition, while discourse of liberal sentimentality romanticizes the gender figure of the fugitive slave, while trajectory of bondage to freedom is the slave to man. This is the hegemonic imaginary, the crafted version of freedom grounded in the progressive individualism and legibility through conservative unfreedoms of black women left behind. Wall 09. The first ideology helps you through travel and biological relations with migration, gender, the law, having women and children, diluted the written records of many women. Frequently appear in plantations and freedom seizures is important to given the absence of enslaved women from the enslaved narrative women thought in the South continues with small minorities who escaped to the North and developed slaves were almost always also all authored by men and reflected the gender politics which is represented in abolition as a means of rectifying segregation. Women's freedom chooses spread uncomfortably in abolition tradition and embraced the fugitivity of the enslaved man and so romanticized archetype of the freedom students unsettled abolition to the march repeated after the trajectory of the North and the tops of the North and stories behind the people of technology, self-representation, were allowed to be held requiring not only integration, dominant narrative, but also reclamation of achievement material for contrary purposes. And U.S. technology allows us to reckon critically the liberal narratives of freedom now comes dominated history, slave memory, abolition, such as gender discourse, and possessions individuals. The one you see ties politics to jobs through extraction of labor extractionism, and this means the commodification and co-option by the state apparatus. Burnett 08. For the state jazz is an imperial military conquest to wield the jazz, to weird cause of the discrimination. Earliest leaders were James Europe, who nailed under the high wood. The significant jazz arriving, the weighted rifle was never moved. This means that the world of music and the biggest story might be reasonably seen as by the much of the prophecy of the paradox of the jazz line between the Uruguay rap that makes military agreement and French could refuse. The public discrimination was enhanced by military marches, music. If the way to push the reclaimation of war and political opponents as well as to reap psychological havoc. Their strategy as a bilingual split the American genius music is pumped through the tanks and the Humvees sound systems while become the solution chief in personalizing, denying the experiences of war. This is a reduction of musical ecstasy to the mere use value of the war industry that logically is not a logical extraction of market life. The alternative is to endorse the party form, which opens up material politics that abolishes the root of anti-black captivity and radical extractionism as the value form. Burton Selly et al. 22. The separation of the communists from the reported were generic view of all communists as white and the black people as liberal anti-communism is battle racial oppression, anti-communism is a key plan of white supremacy, black liberation, socialism is antithetical to racial capitalism. We see the convergence of black and the rights here today into acts in Florida, the FBI raised an African People's Society, the Socialist Party contemporaries called the anti-racist movements, Marxism. There's no economic analysis, but the articulation of communist movement in a way to take away from the size of all the oppressed, the fascism outside. We have to get serious. We cannot build up on the mass movement without organization. Case. Vote negative on consumption. 1. Inherency. The one see performance has already happened, and this debate and ruinous communities have existed since the 1800s. There will always be a group that seeks to set articulations of experiences of black people through jazz, which proves their method is the status quo. There's no change in the world voting class, so drop the team for debatability or for critical engagement because it makes generating meaningful negative positions impossible. Forces us to respond to status quo, which is Nate Ground, Chu, Telos. The one I see is primarily descriptive instead of prescriptive. The affirmative does not highlight a goal-oriented advocacy, but rather for sociological analysis of the status quo, which forecloses a meaningful material tactics, activities, burnout, and exhaustion. And the one I see reconstructs the civilized protocols through which the home is interplayed through making metaphors of domesticity and gardening as failing making home, designing an activity for a breathe. Ruffman 23. The civilization orientation as orientation within the context of the nation-building project services the disciplinary bias technology and is the cruel optimistic attachments and not accidental signaling the aesthetic idea of the family, the domestic spaces within social central force, participating ideas across associated citizenship English etiquette developed in the 1500s provided a modification of social conduct to the good wife guide as the general population how police and discipline themselves functioning is the deployment of sexuality as women's unpaid labor and disciplined children. The domestic home intervests in home tolerant environment with the privatized fantasy of the world and the functions of productive field with sensibility to the new ruling class, domestic orientation, and the facility that a docile subject to operation, by the class domestic spaces become microcosmos for the state nation based on class, gender, race, and sexuality.
Good.
Yep.
Status.
Status is conditional. Yep, conditional.
We told you the app yesterday. Why did you decide to flip neg and read topicality?
We think having engagement over tactics is good, and we
Engagement over tactics
think... So that's the CAPK, but the reason we decided to read topicality is we think having discussions about what a model of debate best produces discussions is a good idea.
So just like, okay, so it's just
And
a
we also
question of
think-
models? So it's just a question of like, oh,
We think models debate is good, but we also think the app is untopical, and that's the reason you should lose.
wait, if the app is untopical, why did you choose to negate?
Because we have
Okay,
a
you know what, that's
competitive
fine. How about,
incentive
let's
to
talk about
win the
competitive
winning
equity.
strategy.
How do we know when there's equity in debate?
How do we know when there's equity in debate? When teams win and lost based on who did the better debating.
That's all, okay, that's fine. Yeah, the domesticity turn, this Ramnath evidence is talking about kitchen tables and sitcoms. Where was the laugh track in the 1AC?
This is an insight of the way the nation has come to understand the position of the home.
It's really not. It's talking about a sitcom and like a British kitchen table. Again, where was the laugh track in the 1AC?
Well, this is saying that through places like sitcoms, the production of what the home should look like through metaphors of domesticity and gardening,
Right, through
reproduce.
sitcom. Wait, where does this card mention gardening?
Well, we're just giving you an example of a thing in the 1AC.
Wait, hold on. How is gardening domestic? How is gardening like gendered domesticity?
Right. It is about the way in which homeliness is tied to these things.
What?
Alright, so there's no
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. The CAPK, who leads the party?
Who leads the party? Well, it's democratic centralism, so there's not one individual leader, but rather a process of developing a party line that
Cool. That's fine. When there's, let's say in a collective, there's 50 white people, 20 black people. The 50 white people said they've done enough about race education and they don't need to pursue it more. The 20 black people disagree. How do you reconcile
we
this?
definitely go with the caucus of the 20 black people. It is democratic centralism is not a democratic where every person gets a singular vote, but rather an engaging discussion through debates and things of that nature around the party
Right,
line.
and when 50, and what happens when the 20 black people in the party, okay, get crowded out by
They
the...
won't, because 20 is a substantial number, first of all. But
Yeah,
second
but
off,
there's also, more than twice.
I think, but like,
The argument is that issues pertaining to things like anti-blackness in the party
Or
line, to things like
questions
anti-blackness,
of the-
should be done by black people and
So,
people within black
the
caucuses.
party line would be to defer, sort of.
Okay, to
understand
defer
this.
to, okay, that's fine. Let's talk about, can the alt result in Marinage whatsoever?
No.
Actually, can any of the positions you've run, any of the critiques
No.
run
No.
in Marinage? Cool. Capitalism, why did they handcuff Jalen Walker after they shot him 60 times?
Well, I think we could look to the best 23 evidence, and it describes the way in which value has emerged.
Values emerged, why did they handcuff him after they shot him 60 times? That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send out the 2ACs. It's case framework, the critique.
Bergamot.
Didn't you lose to the back in home?
I definitely did. And that article came out in 2011.
That's like the ball.
Caught that.
Oh, they took me to Cyber Zone 6-7 instead.
Hmm?
Cyber Zone 6-7. Cooking coach.
Uh-oh. You hate that shit. What?
So queen too.
Darren Cruz.
Okay, I'm good.
I haven't gotten it, but if you're ready.
based on a disavowal of blackness and the issues of enclosure that sustain the world in and out of debate. The world nurtures blackness. An object not working to be butchered to sustain the world. The impact is enclosure, Western man. If the workers secure homes by punching blackness outside the world, gratuitous violence, displacement, degradation, and extractivist relationship within and outside debate, put black people in houses, not homes, objects of labor forced to live for captivity, not work. This is why black prisoners in Angola are forced to work for pennies, while you'll do labor rights, excluded black domestic workers, while unions like the AFL built wage war by barring black workers vote affirmative for insurgent homemaking as maroonage, a right to strike from and intervene in those anti-black processes. Strategic inhabitation enables blackness to create zones of survival, care, and resistance where space is not meant to be made. Assad is Billy Creams, Common Ground Collective, the Underground Railroad, the Greatness will help the affirmative. The breaks apart anti-black labor processes to make the world untenable, enabling blackness to collectively bargain on its own terms. The role of the judge is to be a gardener, aligning yourself with homemaking and using your ballot to cultivate an environment surrounding the home to be livable and bring forward black life. It's not a question of how much violence we can resolve, but a question of how maroonage intervenes into a world where black labor is constantly expropriated. They have not grappled with Keith Lamar, a wrongfully convicted black man on death row, who shows how when niggas are forced into carceral houses like debate, we can maroon and construct home through things like jazz and poetry. The song in the 1AC was not just any jazz song, rather a song that Keith Lamar made from within the confines of the carcerality, which shows how even within the spaces of prisons, niggas can still maroon and use things like jazz to create momentary instances of joy and reprieve, which is good. Now, inherency is a bad standard. We have made arguments about how the very reading of the 1AC is sufficient for solvency because it forces these spaces that have complicit whiteness to contend with the nature of anti-black violence. There's no internal link between voting neg and party formation, which you should drop them for debatability. Yes, Telos, the 1AC is both descriptive and prescriptive. Maroons want to destroy the sugar plantation and provide niggas moments of respite. The domesticity turn cross-sex shows that there's simply no link here. The affirmative it's not Western domesticity, it's a reclamation of Maroon locality that made this the construction of livability for all within the community. Home has been stolen from black bodies to replace it with the domestic, and our analytic is necessary to reclaim that concept for black bodies. They embrace the Africana woman and gendered bodies who rely on our analytic for survival. We should air nag. This card is about sitcoms, and cross-sex shows that there is obviously no part where the 1AC has engaged in this. Now, framework, slave containment dissad. Framework is a manifestation of black displacement, tasking teams to combat blackness as a threat to be eliminated. We are at the People's Tournament. We've been debating unions all year. The topic is almost over, and their inability to engage at this point is a trained incapacity based on the desire to build a home that's inseparable from the NDT sending decor messages to schools and black teams, the invention of black debate as a term to segregate the community, the PRL and white flight from CEDA, surveillance, and targeting of black debaters by police, etc. The impact is enclosure. The invocation of T is a performative move of anti-blackness which prevents niggas from accessing the space and causes niggas to die to spirit murder. They mask their threat construction surrounding black and migrant life via oblique identifications with huge use of flaming. So you should affirm the right to strike by not voting on T. Counter-term affirmative will provide a constitutive analysis of workers and a method of expanding collective bargaining in the United States. It's a perm that reflects how teams have always responded to the resolution. The excluded Meridian says right to strike and collective bargaining discussions is right erasure and turns our model and proves that we meet House Park and Community and Demerara. Rebellion spread across 71 plantations. The rebel agrees to collective bargaining by several campaigning overseas. And securing arms, they demand freedom by force from Maroon communities around the colonial John after they demonstrated roots of civilized freedom. In same championing the rest of freedom over slavery world, slavery was uneconomical. The events took the form as a mass strike. The rebels said the dream of going beyond collective bargaining. They bid for emancipation. This internally turns predictability and proves that they overlimit blackness out of the conversation. Blackness and method debates underpin the topic. Their offense is based on bad research practices, which proves that black reasonability checks. That's the 20CA USFG distracts us from what's happening right now. Monty 20 USFG comedy. It doesn't between lived experience, evidence, foster plan response, applicability, the cause of general real war applicability. B resolves. It's determined. C strengthening is to make something stronger. And D should is critique Roman and 20 statements to understand ruling interests. And E CBR means giving effect to abstract rights. HRW and 2K collective bargaining takes a variety of forms. The underlying right must be given effect. Now, the alienation just has Sorrentino that the Beer Masoka evidence says that workers' rights must distance itself based on the slave. And then to mystify how the human home relies on a grammar of labor secured in opposition to blackness. This seduces complicity with how an anti-black world manifests in and out of debate that their desire for instrumental focus. Only reform attempts to avoid that ontological confrontation. They render debate an anti-black echo chamber while alienating black debaters from discussions that don't grapple with the totality of anti-black lines and how it shapes labor. Model's bad. That's just their only net benefit to discussing the T. They weaponize the consent of black debaters who will never debate plan action by imagining them doing so. This reinstantiates white sovereignty as it only proliferates through fantasies of submission. It means you should not evaluate them. Fairness and clash arcs are rooted in distancing from black article. A, they get all core links. Since we defend strikes and collective bargaining, they have to tailor it to black's problem. B, KVK debates are inevitable and good. General strike versus dual party Meridians versus equal and exchange hero work versus pessimism. These debates force teams to confront the centrality of plantation slavery. You should make them win that those debates should never happen. C, functional limits and limits explosion. D, limits explosion is inevitable. Their model incentivizes avoiding class with fixed process counterplans and new apps, etc. E, equal rules do not correct unequal baseline key from wrongful conviction, prep disparities charge, and bias coach accused means procedural fairness is impossible since it's conditioned by structural unfairness, and F class is not content neutral and their standards are internal links to discussions regarding impact turning. If discussing the topic the way they want trades off with what black people need, then we should not discuss it. Method discussions are more accessible since black life is defined by questions of how to navigate the world. If they go for topic education, it presumes that black laborers aren't central to the topic, which is erasure, impacts the 1AC, and status quo solves because of the discussions that they have on the case. Okay. At the top is the alienation, just had capitalist analysis of work and disavows the master-slave relationship, black to not sell labor, was converted into an abstract object of labor, not for capital, but for all society. It turns decay, reorienting labor dynamics. Does not solve how blackness is self-coded by standard de facto organizing, while extending anti-black status code to perm to build the affirmative. Is going to mobilize energy, all can filter towards movement through perm to the apparatus. It's always already brought together anti-capitalist organizing equal 16th, though ancestors of the civilization was speaking capitalist integration, new political forms of communities require the creation of substituting the modes of production, liminal freedom, murder, dungeon, house, arm, murder, navigate realities, extractive methods of exchange, communication, society, gender, create something new, marriage, engage in warfare, and protect communities beyond the bounds of colonies. 4, yes, perms. Method rates, anything else goes to revolutionary education, false choice means a non-competitive alt wins 5, perm, create home within the Communist Party, defer to me. I want to create home within their formation. This was cross-ex. They said that to defer to black people, so they should do it in this round. 6 is the local proletariat, decide the alt cannot solve for those cast as non-workers, the homeless, the institutionalized prisoners, people on welfare, as sex workers, as deemed as lumpen and unorganizable liberators, prevents those body from getting deprioritized under the category of worker liberation by enabling transiency and spaces for those who cannot get up. They go great terms will prove 8 7 conditional case are voting issues and obstacle destroys FTAT. This they piece essentially undercover and keep the others close revolutionary education by allowing them to whoever in support of their movements and range scholarship fungible unconditionality solves and floating picks are a voting issue. Floating picks are a voting issue, allows for the next to all offense, eliminates any benefits actually debating about homemaking, which last steps for revolutionary testing to form a web fluidity which allows them to extract labor of the app under the guise of their own politics. Number checking the team solves. Now, the all needs and codes are really evidence. One is the inside out just has the notion that this space is somehow uniquely immaterial, not a space for blacks and rebel is bad too. It's inevitable. Some niggas are here without choice, scholarships, commitments, etc. They have to find some way to survive here, which sometimes means insurgent constructively home 3 wrong. This part is about the university, but it doesn't say anything about policy debate, CEDA, etc. We are at the People's Tournament, which is a unique site for revolutionary engagement. 4-link turn decommodification means that platform of the app is keyed up to standardized history, so wellness, knowledge, community, black geographies, and ecology, scholarship, culture, and surety, conclusion, scholar activism, and child inclusion that does not consider literature as all surety because black culture return attention to the maturity of create strategies, make space the insured nature. It's going to buy time to bend scholarship for scholarship as they tend to the mass. Reason reduce the black experience of slavery. 5, they link to they have also participated in the debate and directed scholarship. Their readings and no less. Then argue the Andrews 18 evidence. 1 is inevitable. Escape is imposed onto black life and close out society. It's only a question of whether we can lean into that escape to create resistance. 2, our analytic is not escape or achieve or strategic. And habitation, harmony. About 18, tradition is thought to produce the thought of the outside while the inside closure is brutal practice about finding ways to produce an outside. From within, giving the outside of military mass and thinking a lot about the whole. We will continue to act to produce the thought of the outside can only occur from the inside, cut the card, and from the inside. And feed the long evidence, no link, we do not link to this. The affirmative did not say slave to man, and we do not link black women to the Hajj, Jamaican Marines built gender central for making infrastructures that protected black women from plantation sexual violence and economic dispossession. The Colombo Marines make black women's autonomy mandate within their community. We get new answers. Once it becomes a real link, the Brennan card, it's wrong. Just because the military is capable of use jazz before does not mean that jazz is bad. All media, including the 1AC, is subject to co-option, absent running away from systems of power. The CIA will co-opt anything, including communism and their alternative. And we're not a jazz act, we're a Maroonish act. And to say that jazz is an example of this. Now, the alternative debating. There's a burnout decide, which only the affirmative solves because Marines provides temporary moments of reprieve. 2, democratic centralism fails at least to nepotism less. And 22, counter-deployment is used by the anti-turn to democratic assessment of the road. Dictatorship and abuse of state power and controls the anti-doubling influence of movement and controls resources, tendencies, and multitude project democratic centralism tendencies originate from entitlement, cut the card. At entitlement, 3 is reparations. Decide their frames of reparations as an obligation of payable debt. The one the party has fulfilled post all is bad. It's an impact turns the imaginary war one in. And then once the crimes of slavery are rectified, re-legitimizes whiteness and NC, which has redeemed itself. And that was their own evidence, and they are a performative double turn. They hid Dean, which is a racist dog with soul, and you should be suspicious when they hide racists in their politics. Dean in 16 cheered, and Dean should return to communism because it marked the end of identity politics, used a derogatory term anti-racism, and see that's merely cultural.
Okay. Are you ready for props?
Yep.
Okay. I got condo and floating pigs. Anything else is a reason to reject the team?
No.
The next question then.
Well, actually, no. This Jody Dean thing. Yeah.
The dean? Okay, sure. Okay, the next question I have is what does the role of the ballot was the judge to be a gardener? What does that look like?
It means that the judges create space that prioritizes black accountability. We use the language of the gardener because the 1AC for is an analytic of home, i.e. the space surrounding the home, insofar as we have made arguments about how debate is complicit in whiteness. The judges ought to reject that and take the stance that says no to that and affirms homemaking.
Okay, how does an affirmative ballot say no to whiteness that exists in the home? Like, is debate the home?
Is debate the home? No, our argument is that debate is complicit in whiteness, which is the uniqueness for the affirmative, which is why we need to do things like insertion and drug laws. We've read a piece of evidence in the 1AC from Athenis August and Tigino, which says that debate is complicit in white practices. We read a piece of 2AC evidence, Sergamon and Talo, which says that in these spaces of whiteness, there's an active silencing of things like black scholarship, analytics of homemaking that are good for black life, such that the presentation of the 1AC alone is sufficient to force these spaces that are complicit in whiteness to contend with the nature and analytic of anti-blackness.
Does the presentation only solve if they vote for it?
Does the presentation?
So the presentation alone is enough to solve for calling out the sort of whiteness that exists within
yeah.
debate?
Yeah, and we think presentation, by necessary, would be like tied to the ballot. We think if the 1AC has forwarded a good method, vote at.
How are we supposed to negate your presentation?
How do you negate presentation?
Mm-hmm.
By saying presentation is bad.
By saying the form is bad? Or?
You can say whatever you want. Our argument is that debates can also be a site for figuring out strategies that are good for black life. You can propose alternative strategies, i.e. in this debate, you've read the CAPK, you've read an alternative. If you win that the alternative is more desirable for black life, then that's a sufficient banquet condition.
Okay. I want to talk to the perm. How you've indicted the alternative as causing burnout and sort of this reparations argument. How does the permutation resolve those DAs?
Because we think that these sort of slippages in the alternative occur because absent an analysis of how blackness is extricated from the labor frame and the categories of the worker, it leads to things like saying that we can, in your card where you talk about, quote, restoration of total value expropriated from the slave. You cannot do that. You cannot fully give back that which was stolen from the slave.
So my finger.
I think I need a little bit more food.
Hey.
Okay, resume prep.
Remember, no matter what they say, this will be going one day. A little too.
Fucking you. Fucking you.
You don't see it? Like, I would think you should.
Pause at 3:50. I'm going to send out the duck. That has been sent. The order is going to be the critique in that case.
Sorry, how much you said you had?
350.
What?
350.
8 cards?
Yeah, I sent it out.
What's the order?
The critique and then case. Are we good?
I've not gotten it, but I know you're.
Is everyone good? All right. Awesome. So, let's
Capitalism's constant expansion, desire for profits, existential means to try to fast and effective work. Something that's best. 23. Capitalism sustains its hegemony through racialized gender, enables violence, best describes how technology of race and gender, accumulation of capital that produce a higher goal social order to maximize surplus labor extraction, where social political differences produce new dimensions of class for capital to exploit, takes out the Mungurimoski. 22. Evidence in the one you see because the openness of blackness to labor and violence did not come from some sort of ontological status or being, but rather from a matrix of evaluation from capital. The 2 AC's concession of the Bern-Staley 23 evidence proves how we link turn in our prerequisite to the affirmative. The structural location of blacks is a conceded framing device that filters your evaluation of the round because it shows how capital uses economic relations to disempower blackness while extracting surplus value from black bodies. The conceded examples of redlining, wage gaps, sharecropping, and land tenants are all examples of how anti-blackness is perpetrated through a medium of capital that is terminal solvency deficit to the avs. They have not described how their method resolves in the global destruction of capital, and also supercharge the link offense I'm going to do below, which means you're voting negative because only the alternative can create a world where the exploitation and death of black people is not profitable in the status quo. I'm going to respond to the alienation, dissat here, impact here, and a generalized theory of value is the only way to explain anti-blackness as unique and persistent because it explains liberal colorblind politics that refuse to see race and class as entangled and thereby disproportionately harm black people. In other words, we cannot see an abolitionist capital as urgent for black liberation precisely because capital makes it seem like slavery no longer exists, even though if its conditions persist in a mystified and abstract form. Then they say the term do both Nichols card. I'm going to do the Maroonage link here. Maroonage mistakes fly for freedom, but you cannot outrun capital. Mr. Maroonage only sustains itself through concessions to the state that allow fascists to ignore fugitives at the expense of selling out those who don't fit NYU's home. That was 1 Andrews 18. The 2 and Nichols evidence is neg evidence because it proves that Maroon communities signed treaties that disavowed runaway slaves in return for property rights over land, which proves the link turns the Av 2 Nichols 16, Iowa in blue. The treaty underlines a Maroon's form reflection of language that guarantees sovereignty, which challenges understanding Maroonage in Jamaica. Maroonage communities who signed the treaty attained a measure of autonomy. In return, they assented to repelling runaway slaves. Maroonage signatories were required to return all runaway slaves to colonial authority. Maroonage necessitates an active understanding of economic forms of sovereign Maroonage. The people who the affirmative fugitivism leaves behind are black women who were systemically excluded from flights during abolition. That was the Wong 09 evidence. They were plaintiffs for freedom suits, but concessions were taken advantage of by men who became the romantic archetype that the 1EC attempts to recreate. This positions the Avs politics as fundamentally extractive on black women who are the energy and backing of their home that never actually gets the benefits of the home. Enslaved women were structurally denied the same capacity for fugitivity by the demands of gendered labor and intercommunal pressures of gender. The affirmation relies on a politics of resilience rather than reorganizing the political economy that requires it can't before. Women consistently made up a small minority of those who made it freedom. Permanent freedom near 9% of fugitives running for generally were men the pyramid. Women's reason were for the family responsibilities in gender household depend on women for their survival. Community sanctions against women abandoning their children. Normalized pressure invoking a standard of respectable women. The link is turning the affirmative because it puts them in the double because one intercommunal violence. The process of fugitivity requires misogynoir and selling out the black folks that don't fit in. Also means the communities they inevitably create are going to fungibilize and continually extract from black women to sustain a favored image in the eyes of imperialism, making it rampant with misogynoir and anti-blackness, which reproduces the racialized and gender logics that they think are violent. The second argument is counterinsurgent crackdown. Maroonish society can only work on doing concessions through the state, which empirically looks like settling on indigenous territories and assimilation of Western cultural values and selling out runaway slaves, which proves that fugitive societies can only be sustained through reliance on further entrenchment of imperialism and anti-blackness. There's definitely no permutation because they said in 1EC Crosslinks that negation looks like saying tactics like Maroonage are bad. I'm going to do the framework debate here. This is a debate of competing practices. Winning the statement that a safe space for black people is good is not sufficient for act valid because it's a non-unique observation. The necessity for competing tactics means that the role of about is vote for the team that best supports the material exportable strategy for resistance against capitalism. The ass performance being good for debate or the people in this room is not a reason to affirm two warrants. The first is to see the material dissat. The role can only be changed through material disruption to its base, which means that their capital thrives off of affective resistance like the ass because it feels easy, but it sees the materials of racial colonial capital that produces the conditions of violence in the first place because they make activists feel like they are doing something revolutionary even though they are not. That was the theory of power debate. And then I'll do the exportability dissat. The neg can only meaningfully engage with the affirmative when guaranteed literature that presumes political exportability beyond debate. 2 impacts revolutionary clash. They themselves say it's good on things like condo. Debate is at its best when asked to produce revolutionary clash about how to create a world where survival is in question in the first place. Cross-6 conceded that negation is good for doing things like diving into literature and discussing black radical tradition, and our model is something that uniquely optimizes that. On the condo debate. Condo is good. 1, it lets us test the affirmative from multiple angles at once, which produces a more holistic testing for their method, which is uniquely good in these kind of debates, because, and it turns anti-blackness because it's key to checking if their method reproduces violent structures and does things like sell out black women and runaway slaves, which is also key to revolutionary clash, which I extended above. The second argument is that reasonability checks. We read only one alternative in this round. True, so we didn't harm engagement. The third argument is that revolutionary support is irrelevant. It's a question of which tactics are good or bad, and the neck being able to talk about multiple different tactics are good. Then picks, not going for one. Then the Dean stuff. She's an et al. In the Bern-Staley alternative card. Reasonability checks because they need to explain 1, which part of the card was Dean's contribution, and 2, how that part of the card is racist. Anything else reproduces misogynoir because it blames black women like Bern-Staley for shit that they did not do. Additionally, it's at most a reason to strike the card. They say that we should defer to black people. No, we should not defer to black people if their politics reproduces things like misogynoir. That is the Maroonage link. They say this DA about sex workers. Wrong. Our analysis of historical materialism is the only thing that can understand how things like sex work are understood and commodified by capital in the first place. Sex workers are deemed unorganized by the alternative anyway, so this is not at all a link. I'm going to do the jazz debate here. It's a link to the AF and it's a net benefit to our framework. Jazz has repeatedly operated to reinforce imperialism since the 1800s, and NYU does not offer analytic that can absolve the linkage which reproduces hegemony. Military marches were used to disseminate and develop jazz as we know without the written away evidence. For example, jazz was used in settler colonial devastation in Iraq, with military operators blasting jazz while destroying Iraqi land as cultural justification for imperialism. You should understand the affirmative defense of jazz through the Cold War. State Department tools, civil rights artists like Dizzy Gillespie were funded through the state apparatus as a political tactic to gain allies by papering over anti-blacks and like lynchings, which they determined as politically controversial. I'm not going to read this card. That turns the affirmative as a tactic in performance because of co-option. The Academy in debate uses the 1AC's jazz performance to absorb dissent and prove multiculturalism, abstracting away anti-black and gender labor categories that make debate possible in the first place. The hotel staff who clean the rooms, the custodial staff who take out the trash, the coaches on the clock arranging food and transportation, systemically underpaid judges, and the people who mine the minerals and the chips that our computers run on have all burned themselves out to make this debate possible. But the 2AC's frame on jazz and their performance being good in this debate is what abstracts away this balance and gives the Academy a veil to obscure this subtraction, which also locks in resiliency politics. Thinks about the 2AC being like Keith Lamar created jazz and can still have momentary joy, but after that momentary joy, he was still in fucking prison, which is why we need debates about how to tear down prisons in the first place and not just like how to resist or feel happy within them. That results in anti-blackness being continually reproduced in a state of survival but not actually thriving. That's a uniqueness claim that turns any one-year pivot on it's just about this debate into offense, because narrowing the scope of discussion locks in an extractive relation to the global south and other people in the space. That is what the 1C Alanis and Cozzarelli describes as strengthening the university passport to the middle class, while giving exploitation that happens a radical image. They had a few responses. They said that some people are here without choice and need scholarships. True, but that doesn't mean that their engagement within the academy should not be ethical. The second argument is they said the people's tournament is a unique reason for revolutionary clash. That's a reason to vote for our framework and not a response to this argument. The third argument said that platforming the AF is key to Sanitize history. The Servant, Moulton, and Salicard is just saying black geographies are good, even if that is true. Generally, we are saying that their black geography is bad. That was a Maroonish and Jaslyn's, which proves our analytic is just much better than the kind of generic analysis this card is doing. Now, I'm going to go to the alternative. I'll do the permutation first. Group the perms, they boil down to the same thing, but they include the AF and the alt. If they don't include the alt, that's bad. They solve none of our offense. If they don't include the AF and that severance, it kills testing of the 1AC, which is a reason to reject. In turn, solvency as per 1AC cross-sex is also a reason to negate on presumptions since it proves that the AF is neither necessary or sufficient to resolve their offense about X. I'm going to be light here because in the 2AC, all you needed was say perm do both without explaining what that actually looks like, what the synthesis of the tactics means, which means the 1 year is going to have to be completely new on this question for you to actually be able to resolve anything. And then at that point, you shouldn't evaluate it. And if you do, then you should give us new 2 in our arguments. Go to the alt. The alternative is to affirm Communist Party organizing as a historic necessity by utilizing focused planning tactics to orient political energy towards meeting the needs of material needs of the masses. We'll defend 3 tactics: 1, democratic centralism; 2, political education; and 3, show the people programs. They read this argument about democratic centralism failing down with the Blessed 23 evidence. Is a specific analysis about the ANC, but do not describe how this actually applies to, does not actually describe how this applies to the alternative. Then on this accountability debate, 1AC cross-sex was terrible in this part of the debate, which means the bar for the alternative is really low. I asked what their accountability mechanisms are, and they're just like, well, it looks like different things for different people, which is not a fucking answer, which means you should let the Maroonage intercommunal violence argument that I made above filter these spaces as unsafe and parasitic, particularly for a black woman. You can concede, cross-sex was conceded about things like caucus organizing, solving, and deferral politics. Delegations such as the Black Caucus can have meaningful participation in democratic centralism, where if a person is exhibiting violence, the question of what to do with that party member is not in the hand of cis whites. Additionally, re-education solves. Members are put into programs where they read and discuss literature and form the party line. Now, I'm going to respond to this energy argument here. Yes, the response to the energy argument is that fighting against capital is uniquely key for energy, i.e. when the FRSO organized with to lower rent by 40% in 10 unions, that is something that was energizing for black people that were experiencing that because they did not have to work that extra job. They did not have to work that extra job. We are winning a kind of structuring theory of power about how energy, like the world is not de-energizing just because of it, but because of how capital constructs that, which means only the alternative can solve the root cause of capitalism. On the reparations, DA, the alternative is repaying debt to black people by tearing down capitalism. That was a theory of power above, and since they're not winning a DA to the alt, it's not offense.
Oh, are you good?
Yeah.
This link about black women's labor, can you explain it?
Yes.
Obviously after this.
Yeah, so the link is that the kind of fugitivity narrative that the 1AC relies on is something that historically excluded black women and was extracted
Okay, how
from
does
black
it,
women.
you said it historically excluded black women, how have the 1AC, or the affirmative excluded?
Right, well, because we're saying the affirmatives, Maroonage narratives are not distinct or separate from the ways in which Maroonage of the past has relied and extracted upon black
women.
women.
That's not my question. I'm saying, how has the 1AC excluded or left black women behind? You've said historically, narratives of Maroonage have done so.
Right.
Confuse how the 1AC has done so.
Well, the bar would be for the 2AC to have explained how you de-link our broader historical analysis of the tactic you have defended
Well,
as
we
being
said things like the
exploitative on
Jamaican
black women.
Maroons built homemaking infrastructure for black women, the Colombo
Like, I can read, like, I don't think you read that card, and if you did, like, you can read it in the 1 hour, and I have a
But
re-highlighting.
I feel like this is weird. You're tying down the affirmative solvency for black women to me reading a card.
You're, like, doing
when we've made specific analysis as to how maroon communities are uniquely good for black women.
Okay, whatever. I want to ask you about this jazz link.
Yeah.
Do niggas get to listen to jazz while they are
Yes,
in the party?
like, our
Yes.
argument,
So
our
why
argument is
doesn't it
that
get co-opted then?
Yes, our argument is that if you want to listen to jazz or not is like not what we are deciding upon. We are deciding upon if jazz is a useful starting point or praxis for politics.
Where
That
have
is
we
the
said
level.
that jazz is a useful starting point?
Well,
We've
well,
said
this is where
maroonage as insurgent homemaking jazz is an example of such.
Well, if jazz is an example of your tactic, then critiquing jazz as a tactic obviously is a link to the app.
No, but I'm saying.
So wait, the alternative means nobody can ever listen to
That's
jazz ever.
not what I said.
Well,
I said that jazz
so
should
that's
not
the
be
link
part.
equally applies to you.
No. Jazz is not part of the alternatives praxis. That is where we compete. You said jazz is a good as a form of maroonage.
Okay.
We have said it is
I
bad.
have another question. How does the alternative get Keith Lamar in the president?
Yeah, so we would say that first, communist organizing historically works to organize within prisons and collaborate with prisoners who are experiencing violence. The second argument is that...
Tell me what that looks like. What is your alternative collaborating or interacting with Keith Lamar look like?
Right, so like for example, there are
you
prisoner
gonna go
unions
up
that
to-
exist in the status quo through which the alternative, through democratic centralism, can provide and orient the party line towards helping the
I'm
people
just
in these
saying-
spaces.
My question was, how do you get him out of the prison?
Yeah, we would say at a broader scale, like the tearing down of capital in the states through large
Tearing down
global
of
base building
Okay.
is the only way
Whatever.
to solve.
If we win no link, will you defer?
If you win that the AF is good, then we
No,
will
if we
defer.
win no link, your response to defer
I mean, yes.
was, okay.
Yes, winning no link.
You said at
yes.
the top of the 2NC, capital makes it seem like slavery no longer exists, so slavery does still exist.
Yeah.
Okay, those cards have been sent. It's just gonna be T. Okay. Is anyone not ready?
1 second. Okay, I'm ready.
Are there any cards?
Yeah, I sent it off. There's a couple definitions, but in TBA part. Yes? Okay. Judges? Yes, yes. Okay.
I haven't gotten it, but have fun.
Okay. We have been given to start across the T framework is a conversation about what engagement looks like within the space. Dropping the one in R from the one in C, that T is a prior question, means you default to complete our interpretations. Winning the one in C was good, doesn't prove the counter interpretation. And negative element for it does pick a winner on, but it doesn't solve any structural impacts. That means the net benefit to their interpret is about the type of model it encourages is not offensive, but you can vote negative and agree with claims that the one in C performance was good or that debate has a history of racist rhetoric, but, and you can also disagree with the fact that some topical debates could be bad, but in order to vote negative, it is sufficient to vote negative about the fact that our model produces better engagement. I'm going to answer the slave containment TA here. First, none, no link. They must win. The way in which we have engaged in framework of the conversation in this debate is uniquely evil, which they can't do it because in order to win this DA, the 1 AR is too late. It would have to be a new argument. But see, there's some defense. I'm not asking you to stop pretty critical arguments. And in order to make, I'm not asking you to make CEDA the NDT, but if CEDA truly is people tournament, then conversations about what debate should play in this space will matter even more. But your model cannot solve because voting for interrogation of the topic is not the way state respectability politics are going to get corrected in cesspool or increase homes for women and moms out there. But white flight from CEDA being historically true, but it is not something that is a result of our any model, especially not ours. Plus, its ways is flee because we allow your critical scholarship and only on the things like the switch side debate solves here. It is built stronger and is for benefit for our model because it's only solved through switch side debate. Now, the closure, impact, and spirit murder is wrong because fairness is entrenched. It's not entrenched in legacy of the people are fish back. Ballot proximity is the most equitable version of debate, and also no spirit murder because framework is a core, not a ceiling, meaning acting still in debt with the top will strength without losing core policy scholarship. The TVA will prove this, but that will be below. Develop that the interprets whoever did the better debating is good because it limits judge intervention, and unfair debate is impossible. That means to some extent they also believe in fairness because they float speech times and answer cross-ex questions. The way in which we engage with other matters, but in order to limit judge intervention and limit spirit murder, we must have fair debate. Now, the intertropical affirmatives must strengthen collective bargaining rights. Federal government means USFG in Washington, Thompson said strengthened is more efficient, which their definition agrees with, so that doesn't matter. But collective bargaining is governed by the state, which is for an LAO, and workers mean all. That's LAO 81. Now, they've not met the definition of workers because not all individuals can engage in maroonage, and they don't make collective bargaining because it's not a union negotiating with those employers. This means only a negative interpretation generate the most predictable limits, which there's no risk of limit exploitation. Now I'm going to do the counter interp here. First, they're read Sean and Flow. They've read counter definitions and interp debate. That means at some level they agree that debate about models is good. The 1 AR is way too late to kick out of this, and they have conceded that competing models is the way you should evaluate the round. And I'm going to do it's not a permutation because Monteith is not defining the way in which the revolution solved. You cannot have multiple competing definitions because that's predictability, which is bad for revolutionary clash. The clash impact proper will be below, but revolutionary means declaring by vote. Webster 7 declares this from vote. Should means immediate certain. Summers 94. A conscious matter should be more than desirable. Should must denote a phrase that a law is immediately effective on the future. CBR is agent antagonistic. Lucent in Malton 96. Legislative change courtesans of the EO's journey to opinion and collective bargaining rights. Now I'm going to do the limit work here. First, it's not a question of whether our research is bad or the way in which anti-blackness is inscribed into labor limits and things of that nature, but idea casting is key. They've stated that the only reason the valuable of the debate of clash is through rigorous levels of multi-level clashing. We never get there perfectly, but clash is a good form of education. This turns their scholarship into because only our model of interrogation. Think back to what I see with it. Then it says the mom has insomnia from working night shifts. The only topic education can understand the ways in which unions can prevent that. Unions check back against things like longer hours, allowing you to be home more. That is good and is unique benefit to our model thing they can and never will access. Now, the only way for negative to engage in scholarship and engage about the ways anti-blackness operates both inside and outside this is if we encounter it in the world of needs, we must have more clash. Yet they have proposed it in this round. Now, all the work I just did about proves uniquely how KVK 1 cannot solve its own, but 2, our model solves it because revolutionary class is predicated on both teams coming into the shared vision debate. It's a two-way street and it works best when we have shared vision. I'm going to answer the alienation debate here first. There's not avoidance of discussion because we control the direction of fairness. The fairness means that the more fair debate is, the more safe it becomes marginalized people's fairness. If it's the personal violence, it's a judgment register, we should seek to push back against the negative welfare and track participation in a way, while the act model drives people away. That is bad, but rather the way we engage the community and engage each other in this space is uniquely valuable and is not pushing or crowding out all the work I did above how the labor topics can be interrogated. Now they cannot go for models bad when they run a counter that was above, and still valid proximity is important because it's the only thing that resolve the structural unfairness in the round. Even if things like resources constraints exist, it is not a reason to vote down the model because we should still strive for a fair model of debate because it means that the substance of debate is predicated on the idea of engagement in the first place, which they have dropped. It is only possible through a fair model, which when we don't meet the definitions that ground pre-research stage that pre-research engagement is important. They have never read a list of any negative generics and cross-links prove. They said we can engage with the performance however we want in this round, which see therefore is rejoinder. I cannot stand up and say your performance is bad or your mom should have to go to work. That's ridiculous. It's not a reasonable position. This is why our model is best for KVK debates because negating someone's individualizing performance is either 1, violent for the negative team, but 2, violent for them, and 3, ties the violence to that individual action, which is independently bad and a reason to reject their model. Only our model provides a means in which we can understand revolutionary clash with the other. Now, even still, I did the KVK worked above, but TVA proves it provides any defense. The TVA is secondary strike. Secondary actions can be address uneven experiences. In 2012, a secondary strike support the primary strike is intended as asserting the conclusion of the evolution of workers' stability to respond to the context of labor and and similar obstacles. You can look to the way teams have been reading this. You can look to the way in which secondary strikes can strike for anti-black measures and across the nation, which leads to a general strike, which would be good. The TVA solves all of our offense because it provides to all workers in the USFG, and it's collective bargaining. This is good because it also solves most of theirs, and even if it doesn't solve every 1AC argument, it certainly creates a space, and it does solve the, the home impact argument, because of the way in which we attune to one another through secondary strikes. That is solidarity, which is good, but even if it doesn't solve every argument, that's good because it proves neg engagement. Now, it proves that top education can attune to block tradition, which provides any sort of defensive claims to the arguments they made on the bottom of the flow, but that the home is stolen domestic space, then only having a space in debate where we can fairly engage in revolutionary clash is good.
10 starting now.
see the car. I'm assuming purple, right?
Yeah. My fault.
No, I just.
Well, I'm highlighting it over.
Good. Discussion of the worker collective bargaining and labor are inseparable from a collective disavowal of the black body, the antecedent to the worker slavery, just that prefigure the modern labor scheme progress for the worker, no function to ethical distancing from the slaves, the object of the worker, non-worker, unable to bargain for freedom from captivity, the impact is enclosure drop, white disgrace, home life displacing blacks from the world, black lives must be rendered unlivable through dispossession, gratuitous response, an attractivist relationship that coerces blackness, labor from soul and captivity, vote out for marriage, the politics of capital plantation, homemaking of right to strike for those anti-black processes to create a home for survival of resistant care, weaponization, assault, literature, performance of the Keith Lamar is one example of an interruption, normative labor discussion, enabling black bodies to produce space, where space is not meant to be made, they functionally drop the case, which means the risk of back offense outweighs now the role of the judge is to be a gardener, center the cultivation of black survivability and resistance within this space. They drop the net benefit which establishing black presence and interpersonal accountability doesn't trade off with the question of food into the better debating, but rather a question of how you filter that towards black survivability and performance inseparable from discourse on methods. They put case how politics are actualized when power relations they sustain presumption. They dropped the case, so I don't need to answer it, but I'll clean up any cross applications. Whatever a method is desirable, any FBF is an extension of pre-existing scholarship. We have uniqueness against their performance, and there's a reason to reject them. Or to drop survey and solid range prevention, key to force minds to confront the ways that sanitize the anti-black violence and complacency. When the anti-blacks go and erase black history, winning uniqueness claim we need to erase that erasure and introduce scholarship when books are being banned now. T. At the top, affirm the right to strike by not voting on teeth and impact to what they exclude slave containment is that they performed a psychic unburdening of engagement with the black radical tradition built on stabilizing, threatening modes of black embodiment. They demarcate the boundaries of what's worth contesting to secure the master's home drop, training capacity. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy where they prepare to be unprepared, which fairness and class because the only reason you can't engage is because you've chosen a model that not teaches. You've proven by the fact that they said spirit murder like 5 times, but he never said that. The fucking 2AC proves models are a bad standard. They drop that they fantasize black submission to a norm that will never actualize, detracting from what they can do here and now, which means it's just center how T is deployed in this debate. Model debates are how training capacity manifests by posing us to the brink that upends the activity. They weaponize black consent, over-interpolating competition to assume black people are just trying to win and also responding to black on survivability debate. Means clash doesn't matter what. It's not our fucking burden to tell you how to negate. White people have the obligation to learn what it means to engage with how black people choose to manifest in the activity. Black people already have revolutionary skills in interrogation because they dropped that black life is always a question of how to navigate and survive in the world. They do not get to assert the moral high ground on man's relationship with their mom. It's their burden to know how to engage with their models inaccessible in the iterative process produces black exhaustion to use black energy as a fuel for the skills which is called the plantation. We prefer no clash, no limits, or racist limits that cause black fungibility. The scroll solves, they could have had a captivate, but are choosing to go for T instead. Devin, you cannot go to the prayer app and think that these arguments are real for Tiff and DeMarvin. You should channel your own lived experience to understand that there's always a role of negation. Fairness, one, slave containment mishandled. It was a racist dog whistle they called upon. Model for equity to deputize and to protect the future of debate against black insertion argumentation. Keith Lamar proves structural and procedural fairness and equity is impossible for black life. And they coerce black submission to a debate for an accessible standard, which means the balance cannot remedy unfairness, but you can use anti-blackness as a society to straight. They drop the Hosberg evidence, which says we meet murders are a form of collective bargaining for all work. Here's the Hosberg evidence that Deborah are revolt collective plus slaves of our 21 plantations, including this is white erasure, which is an impact into all their offense. No ballot big drops the reason to reject the team for being parasitic on black labor, turning black performance into a tool for free balancing. We have an independent reason to reject them now. We have an independent reason to reject them now. Now, the yes KBK debate solved it. Shared street is the SWO, and shared street of engagement is the SWO. And then mystifies the history of this tournament and the black radical tradition in this debate, which should ask yourself how marriage versus decolonization, sabotage versus dual party habits under their interpretation of the TVA. It's illogical. They could engage in our method or advocacy go the dialogue links to our offense because capital's life becomes a substitute for fighting for black life. You've hit this after more than the TVA. You've hit acts like this more than the TVA, which proves trade incapacity, raise DA constant and think good acts exhaust black people reach error act. When their evidence doesn't mention black people once more center in round SSD is wrong. It's a plantation logic that compels black bodies to compel to labor for their education and a model of engagement that's not survivable. Black labor's in negation of, not affirmation for, we've impact turned that stasis locus is always the state, and labor rights not combating the plantation slavery. Drop black reasonability good is good enough over prepared for Mac argumentation because black is always deemed unreasonably. Us reading definitions and endorsing models by proof you couldn't engage but chose not to. They drop the limits. Explosion is inevitable because their model also incentivizes skirting clashing friends with things like crossing catapult pigs and the infinite proliferation of tiny apps on the topic, which means the question is, which means it's solely a question of how you choose to respond to this debate. Anything else? Yeah. At the top, alienation is that I'll enter the jail and walker example for them. 18 blacks cannot be captured within the greater black the labor class or capitalism and stabilize the very foundation of labor. It can't be result of its organization and stabilize the ability for whiteness to have a home, which means it alters the state for black people because they won't listen to black people rather than extend an 18 blacks have to go the rest of the part they read, which is basically just labor. Understand is the way that we understand slavery, but we're saying that blackness is labor, but also must go beyond it, which is a drop case arguments. Now the marriage like homemaking is an analytic solve and it solves accountability by making it livable for quote all in the community. Failures are a byproduct of a lack of homemaking. The drop but this equally links back to the things like the CPUSA justifying black membership. Communist parties working with the police means that if they can learn from the failures of past movements, so can we. And which solves also they mis-highlighted the part that says they didn't comply with the fucking treaties. Quote, just to be considered the implication of burdens and continuation of freedom within the context along with the ambiguous wording of the intentions and loopholes to pervade the treaty act and truly adherence to these measures or lack thereof and licensure between grand marriage communities seeking to maintain their qualified isolationism. The mark the card to isolationism of black women labor link is wrong. Acts about freedom pursuits which are not the Afro escape of fugitivity but strategic inhabitation. Drop the example of the Quilombola Maroons, which means we solve adult justice all this either. The title of black women are at the heart of the struggle to build American communism means they use black bodies as fuel to labor in their politics. Jazz is wrong. We're not a jazz after a maroon after says jazz is one example that can unite black communities and create energy. It's just one example of Barson preempts neoliberal state captures and marriage. And black geographies are collective and cacophony belongs to the state links to them. CPU being used for anti-Soviet propaganda proves all things link back to them. They don't solve their examples of labor because they also require the same labor students discussing alternative perp do both. No new to in our organization learn how to debate. They perp do both. Great Muslim Haitian revolution proves their co-constitutive with communists organizing. The burnout DA says that there is a key remedy because there are those who can't find sufficient refuge in the party that think deferrals, questions of racism in the party means room reclamation sovereignty is a prerequisite and you should defer to the only black debater in this room. Yes, perhaps anything else kills revolutionary education's apple solve. World hunger wins every time. Alternative fails. Black says empirics prove democratic centralism fails and collapse to apartheid bureaucracy, centralized accountability, collapse of nepotism, erasure accountability, stifling dissents. Dare birth to prove they escape because they make structural arguments for democratic centralism. Then reading Jody D proves accountability. It's an identity politics vast full of men out of way to justify black fungibility, which means it's not black phobia, but inclusion of their method means they can't access accountability.
Okay. We had 350.
Oh. Thank you. Oh.
Houston Chamber for Disability.
Oh, oh,
Good for order.
Yes.
All right, it's going to be a critique, it's going to be framework, then it's going to be case. All right, good to go? Nods. NYU. Okay, awesome.
Three things we are winning coming out of the block that are going to make you vote negative. The first is that capital is hurtling towards extinction, which is an external impact that outweighs and turns the affirmative, so you try or die for the alternative. The second is that we are winning a link that turns the F in their solvency, which outweighs any net benefit to the permutation. And third is that this debate is about exportable material tactics, which means we're not going to cop out on the 2 are shifting to performative offense to and protect the 2 are on the theory of power. Capitalism, infinite growth is existential, overaccumulation pushes ecosystems to collapse, motivates increasingly dangerous conflicts, and compounds threats at a point of no return. Best 23 analysis of capital as an existential force was double dropped and now loses the round for NYU because it concedes that finding an effective method that destroys the capitalist machine is a necessary prerequisite to any other impact discussed in the round. So no matter how good the 2 are stuffs on starting on creating a safe home, there can be no safe home if the world is dying from extinction. It's not sufficient to counter capital as a systemic threat, which means you are voting negative to try or die for the alternative. On the alienation is that they say no accountability. I'll do that on the alt. The second part of the argument was that blackness goes beyond labor, but they just concede way too much for this one line to outweigh all the work I did on the Burton, Stilly, and best evidence in the 2 and C. We prove a link turn and a prerequisite to the aft. The structural location of blackness was conceded. Capital uses economic relations to disempower blackness while extracting surplus value. Conceded examples of redlining, wage gaps, sharecropping, and land tenancy are all sufficient reasons for why you should think anti-blackness is not perpetuated through being, but rather through the medium of capital, which dropped today as a solvency deficit to the affirmative, and you try or die for the alternative. They concede that this theory of value is the only way to understand and analyze anti-blackness, which means there's no way that you're voting on the alienation dissent. I'll go to the alternative now. The alternative to a form historical party organizing as a historic necessity by utilizing focus plan tactics to orient political energy towards meeting the material needs of the masses will offend democratic centrals in political education and serve the Pew program. On the Dean stuff, they got to it with 3 seconds on the clock. There is no impact in either ways, and they concede that they would have to prove which part of the cards were actually contributed to by Dean and not Burton Stilly. Otherwise, I reproduce misogyny because it forces Burton Stilly to be accountable for shit that she did not do. On the accountability debate, they dropped 2 things that prove that the party is accountable. 1, caucus organizing. It solves delegations such as the Black Caucus or the Black Women Caucus can have meaningful participation in democratic centralism, or if a person is exhibiting violence. The question of what to do if that party is not in the hands of cis whites. They also concede re-education, that members are put in programs where they read and discuss literature and form the party line, and those who don't learn are kicked out, which prevents things like crackdown and infiltration because feds are not going to stay in the party. They shadow extend the democratic centralism bad card, but concede it was about one specific party and not a general analysis, and that all the work I did in the 2NC and the 200 is massively going to outweigh this really generic card. 1NC cross-section and 1AR had nothing on this part of the debate, which means that the bar is low and it slices both ways. What the fuck are their accountability mechanisms? We have won a historical analysis about how Moronish communities are producing anti-blackness and misogyny. They have not given you a single example of how they actually prevent this violence from happening. They're continually alluding to that home should be safe and we are going to make it safe is not sufficient. And all the historic analysis and the link debate I'm about to do should prove that you should know that there's going to be intercommunal violence and they do not have a way to solve it. Only the alternative does. On energy, it was dropped, but even then, the theory of power proves that energy is material extent. The FRSO lowering tenant unions and energizing black people by lowering rents, which proves that only the alternative can solve. Go to the link. Maroon is mistakes flight of capital, but you cannot outrun capital. That was the 1C Andrews 18 evidence, which means that they have to make concessions for the state for their Maroon's communities to survive. The 2 AC Nichols evidence is really good, specifically gives examples of the kind of things that Maroon's communities have to sign. The re-highlighting is absolutely terrible, and the re-highlighting is absolutely terrible and does not prove anything. It didn't say that they rejected these contracts, just that they were conflicted about doing them, which means that even if some communities are going to reject their, that means that most communities, in order to get their Maroonists, are going to sacrifice others. Now, some conceded examples, both in the 1C card and in the Nichols re-highlighting, which is going to outweigh their examples of Maroonists because they just shadow extend them and don't explain what the contracts actually were or how these Maroonist communities survived without selling them out. And insofar as we were getting a broader historical analysis about how they do things like sell out black women, that 2C card that I forgot the name of was completely conceded, doing the historical analysis about how Maroonist communities rely on the exploitation of black women who are always used to create the home but never get safety within the home, which is all independent reasons as to why Maroonish is incredibly anti-black, reproduces the misogynistic logic that they think are bad, and is a reason to drop it, and is a reason to vote negative independently. Even if they win that they are going to reject the contracts, that just proves the crackdown impact, which was conceded. Because when they refuse the contracts, that then means that the state knows where they fucking are and that they are settled on colonized land, which means that there is going to be massive crackdown even if they get out of that, which is going to reproduce anti-blackness. Yes, I'm also going to, the intercommunal violence impact was largely dropped. They know that turns the affirmative, that Dexter solvency, because the home that they create is not actually a home for the black women and the runaway slaves that they sell out to secure their own freedom, which is a reason as to why you should reject reject the team and why their argument does not solve any of their offense, which means there's absolutely zero net benefit to the permutation. The counterinsurgent crackdown proves that any inclusion of the affirmative in the permutation is going to result in this cracking down broadly and reproduces anti-black and misogynistic violence in the party, which is a reason why you have to reject them. Also, they said in NYC cross-sex negation looks like saying tactics like Marunich are bad, which is an independent reason for why the permutation should not work in this debate, because they have defended one tact and we have impact and link turn it and prove this competitive with the alternative, the framework debate. I don't have to spend the CAPK framework debate, don't have to spend a lot of time here. Conceded the role of the ballot is to vote for the team that supports the best material exportable strategy for resistance against capitalism. The seed, the material disciples dropped, implicated on the CAPK is why material first analysis is uniquely key for fighting things like anti-blackness. The second argument was the exportability disaster. Extend that they said revolutionary clash is good and is an internal feeling to why we should be doing debate in the first place, which is the reason why you're voting for exportable methods. You're not going to vote for something that happened in this debate. You're going to vote for the AF as an exportable method versus the alternative as the exportable method. We are absolutely crushing them on that part of the debates. They have also conceded all of the kind of analysis about how anything else has an extractive relationship on people like the janitors or the people in the global south that make us debating in this space possible, which is why you cannot vote on this was good for NYU or good for the people in that room, because that produces anti-blackness and an extractive relation on the things that make debate possible in the first place. Then, on the jazz argument, sure, we'll concede that it's not a link. Okay, the only thing I have to respond on the permutation is the Haitian Revolution. It was a completely new argument in the 1 AR should strike it, but even then they did not explain how the Haitian community was actually Maronish. Like, they did not go away, they fought against capital, which means this is just a reason why the alternative is good. Like, black people being in the party is not what the permutation looks like. They have defended Maronish, they had to have explained in the 1 AR as to how Maronish and communism are mutually dependent, and they have not won that. We are crushing them on the link debate, which means we're not going to clap out on the permutation. The last thing they said was that we should defer to black debaters in this room, but we have one. They should not defer to black debaters if their tactics reproduce misogynoir. On team, we're not going for a conceded framework, which means that you're not voting on procedural things in this round.
6.
case? Okay. Good. The two in our state this debate on a real highlight of a card that says Marooners are anti-capitalist, and then they went for a cap can with links that they either cannot explain in context or that link back to them. I will lose this debate because we are ahead on the question of how Black life can use Marooners as a surge in homemaking to create momentary instances of joy and reprieve are good. We set the threshold of affirmative solvency at that level, which they are behind on that question. We are ahead on both the substantive and performative level, especially insofar as they have dropped the case. The two did not even get there, which means that you know the affirmative is solvent, and our role as a judge you must prefer because it is the only form of accountability in debate they have dropped. That aligning yourself with homemaking and using your vow to cultivate an environment surrounding the home is good. The net benefit is Black presence in survival. Winning role of the judge implicates the rest of the flow because a risk of offense means that you use the role of the judge to be a tiebreaker because it means that you surrender to the guardian. The 2NR tried to preempt that the 2AR would shift towards performative violence, but towards performative solvency being good, but that is wrong because they dropped the 1AR articulation that you cannot separate how you articulate your politics from what you do in round. Your performance matters for how their actualization of the alternative gets realized, which means that if you do not see an internal link between voting negative, if you do not see an internal link between voting negative and the party formation, then every single thing we do here matters, which means that we are winning a functional net benefit to the reading of the 1AC itself in this space. They've dropped the Sherman and Tal evidence, which says that the very reading of the 1AC is good and outweighs any single impact they could have gone for. There's no extinction in this room, but there is anti-Black violence insofar as we are winning a uniqueness argument as to how these spaces of debate are complicit in whiteness, but the very reading of the 1AC forces them to contend with the nature of anti-Blackness and prevents the sensitization of whiteness which occurs in these spaces, which means that we are winning an in-round solvency while they do not. Now, go to the critique now. The winning condition for them is this argument about Black misogyny, which is incredibly omissive in nature, but it's also wrong. Yes, we have accountability mechanisms dropped in every single speech. We cited several examples. The Jamaican Maroons built gender-central homemaking infrastructures that protected Black women from plantation sexual violence and economic dispossession. Women got to choose what they wanted to do instead of being conscripted to a certain role. Resources controlled by one resident chief. The Colombo Maroons made Black women's autonomy a mandate within the community. Food was controlled. Community women who experienced abuse, control, labor, and proof from offenders, conflicts were handled at the level of the village, not via nuclear household discipline. These accountability mechanisms protected Black women, especially those who sought Marooners to escape sexual and reproductive violence under slavery. It means the articulation of the permutation solved. They have also dropped the 1AC rights evidence. Read it after this round. I want you to think back to 1AC cross-ex when they asked us, how do we know home is safe? It's because homemaking necessarily ought to be safe because we cannot obviously say we know how Black women will create homes, but we have provided a horizon by which Black women can engage in homemaking, which is the 1AC right evidence which talks about how Black women and Africana scholars have found refuge in the analytic of home place with zeros to link. It's amazing. It talks about the way in which home it occurs uniquely at those sex which are unique to them. Now, the alienation is extended. They cannot explain Jalen Walker, which is terminal disadvantage to the alternative. It means that there's a slippage and deficiency in the analytic of the alternative, which makes it an unsafe site for niggas. Insofar as niggas do not get to choose to work, but are the work themselves. A claim against labor possibility is a claim against the non-Black. The top of the 2NR's analysis is how it literally concedes that slavery utilizes capitalism against anti-Blackness, but it was always still slavery in the first place. Remember cross-ex moment where they conceded that slavery still exists, which is the question of being an ontology, which they have not grappled with. Winning ontology means to run the round because it means their analysis of Blackness as a worker can never attempt to unique life that's lived by Black folks. On the alternative, they conceded they cannot explain folks like why Jalen Walker was handcuffed and then shot 1 billion times. This means a permutation is the necessary cycle trait to any alternative solvency because even if they win some analysis of capitalism, our argument is that their analysis mystifies how anti-Blackness is a power ontological determinant that is the grounding wire for our organizations of labor. Now, Perm do both. You've dropped examples of the synergy between anti-capitalist organizing and Marooners, Haitian Revolution, Assad Israel, Mully Kareem's Common Ground Collective, etc. It proves that their alternative requires Marooners as a method of resistance. You cannot do party organizing or get to those forms of accountability mechanisms when niggas need forms of joy and reprieve in the interim, i.e. how do Black women even get to participate in them? How do niggas get to do things? If they never have the energy to begin with, only the affirmative provides that mechanism because Maroons are a form of Maroonage which prevents burnout. At worst, permutation is a corrective measure if you think we win a risk of offense. On the alternative, which would be the blessed evidence from below, some risk of link turn is try and die for the permutation because the only mechanism by which folks like Keith Lamar can still participate in the alternative despite being in prison, or how folks like the lumpen proletariat can still participate. It comes down to, do you want a white or a Black and communist party? Now, the Maroon link is the only thing I really have to answer. They have dropped the framing arguments that Maroons are good and that they have dropped that the same way that their alternative has failed in the past, Maroons can also learn from past movements. One, they have They have mis-highlighted the Nichols evidence. 2 seconds is not enough. It said that there were loopholes in the treaty and that there was a lack of adherence on both sides. They re-highlighted it out of context, and Roberts clearly concedes that Marinus is good. 2, this links to them. They have dropped empirical examples like CPUSA working with cops and subordinating black demands, doing anti-Soviet practices, the ANC affirming apartheid. If they can selectively cherry-pick the ideal form of their movement, it goes both ways and proves that we can learn from chaos, which is why homemaking is a good analytic. The black women labor stuff was wrong. It was done above 1. It links to them harder. It says that black women are at the heart of communist politics in the title of their solvency evidence, which means that they rely on black women's hidden labor to serve as fuel for their movement. The affirmative is the only mechanism that solves the Colombo Maroons and community organized resources, which is all the analysis I did above. Now the alternative, it fails. The best evidence is consistently mishandled. It cites the ANC, but rather says that structural factors mean that centralist politics inevitably mean that any accountability attempts erode over time and move towards nepotism, bureaucracy, and apartheid politics. They've conceded that it is their burden to prove how they avoid that erosion over time. It's not a question of accountability measures existing, or that the structure means they won't persist. It means Maroonage is not better. They said we should defer to black bodies for a question of race struggle. That means Maroonage is a prerequisite that affirms black presence and sovereignty, and you should use this as a means to generate accountability via the permutation, which functions, which shields links to the net benefit, because it says that the permutation is the only way to provide forms of accountability and reprieve in the interim. They have functionally dropped ontology. Permutation to both solves. The only thing they have is this framing argument which says that methods are good. Our argument is that if the permutation and synergy of the affirmative and the alt is the best version of solvency for life, then you should vote for it.
Is anyone interested in the card doc?
Mm.
No. Right, sure.
Which one do you like?
The verbal physical.
Oh, yeah.
Do y'all have any Iowa stickers?
Like on us?
No.
No. We should hand them out to people.
I've been trying to made some NYU ones a while ago.